Hello and welcome back to the When You're Podcast, the podcast for when you're doing anything. Today we're talking about when you're watching Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. I mean, it's just technically, when it first came out, it was just Star Wars, but then they added the Episode 4 and the A New Hope stuff. So anyways, look, today is May the 4th, and I thought this would be a fun time to reflect on the franchise of Star Wars. So let me first start off by saying that when I first watched this movie, I was like about I didn't watch it when I was like until like a while. I was 15 when I first watched it. They was like doing reruns of it or whatever. And it was kind of like my first time ever diving into it, and thankfully that was kind of like the first. I had known about Star Wars, and you obviously know about the iconic line and stuff beforehand, right? But like I didn't really care all that much about the story. I just knew that they fought with the lightsabers, and that was cool, and there was some other thing that happened, and I wasn't all that into it, is all I'm trying to say. But when I watched it for the first time, I was like, man, this is old. I was like, the way that it looked, it was just very choppy, and it didn't look as crisp and as clean as some of the other movies I had seen in the movies, and I kind of watched growing up. But nevertheless, I was interested to like figure it out. And when I first saw Luke Skywalker, like when they first like introduce him and you get to know the character and you like care about him and stuff, I was kind of like at first I was really not all that like, oh wow, this guy is definitely cool. I was like, this guy is pretty not he doesn't seem like the hero type. He just kind of just seems like a regular old he's just a kid, you know. I wasn't like in awe of him. Like sometimes you're in awe of people, right? Sometimes you're kind of like, okay, this is like your everyday average person, but they become like this hero type thing. But when I first saw him, I was just kind of like, it's kind of bland, you know, in my opinion. But then obviously throughout the course of the movie, you're like, he's actually a pretty nice guy. He's not so bad. He's pretty cool. I have no problem against him. And so as you go out through the movie, you kind of notice, and there are things that I like picked up on after the fact, after I watched it. But during my first watching, I was kind of like, he doesn't really get cool or interesting until they get to the the Death Star or the onto Vader's ship is all I'm trying to say. He doesn't get cool until he actually has to do some rescuing. He actually has to do some, he's completing his mission, doing the big boy stuff. So up until then, I was just kind of like, I was a little bit more interested in Obi-Wan and Han Solo. Chewbacca even, I found a lot more interesting because they felt a lot more dangerous, and Obi-Wan was a lot more wise. So Obi-Wan, the first time I saw him, I was kind of like, I was like, this guy is hiding something. He's mysterious, but he's also kind of like, he knows everything about the galaxy, you know? And at the time when I was a kid, I was like, old people are the people to really like look at, and to, you know, you never look at the main character. You look at maybe like the older, more wiser versions, because they always come through with better dialogue. They always have a lot more to say and a lot more to kind of contribute to the story as a whole. Whereas Luke is kind of like, you know, he's supposed to be like the audience, right? He's unaware. He doesn't know anything. He's navigating as it's coming to him, you know. So we're supposed to get it through him, you know. We're supposed to learn about everything through him. But the first time I saw it, I was like, Obi-Wan's so cool. You know, he's really smart, and he's very wise. He's old. He knows a lot about Luke and his family history. He can take him throughout the galaxy, and he kind of like knows everybody, or he kind of has an idea of what to do. Whereas Luke is like, I have no idea what's going on. Let me just follow, let me follow old Ben here. Now, the coolest thing about the Star Wars franchise, you can have all kinds of like, I mean, you could say the Millennium Falcon, or any starship, being able to travel between planet to planets, aliens, being able to maybe levitate and push objects with your hands or through the use of the Force or whatnot. These are all cool abilities and these are all cool things that you can do over time, or that we see in the movie. But the number one coolest thing, you cannot deny it, and it's the most critical to the Star Wars franchise, and that's the lightsaber. The moment I saw that lightsaber, I was like, I mean, at first I just was like, yeah, they just put like a line, like a light blue line on the actual thing, and then they said, look, it's a lightsaber, and I was like, yeah, it's really old, but at the same time I was like, that's so cool. The lightsaber is the coolest weapon to have. It's just so, it's unlike a sword. Now, the reason why it's cool is because I don't think there's not that I'm saying it doesn't require training, but it's like you don't need a lot of muscle to carry it. Like, when you carry a sword, you have to get used to the weight of it, how to precision it just right to cut through stuff. With a lightsaber, you can just kind of swing it and that's it. That's all you need to do, right? It doesn't require a whole lot of brute force, which I kind of like. It's a lot more of a skillful weapon, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you can't, because it's so light, you have to be aware of it at all times. Because I was just kind of thinking, like, with a sword, you can kind of gauge where the end of it is or the tip of it is based on the weight. So you can kind of like, or the way that it, the weight is distributed differently. Okay? So you can kind of like tell, oh, it's going to be too far. I might accidentally stab someone or hit someone. With a lightsaber, it's like, if you swing it around carelessly, you might accidentally hit somebody or do something different, which is why it's like you have to keep your eye on it and you have to have good control. And I always felt like well, for me anyways, the green lightsaber was always the one that popped out the most. But the blue lightsaber is probably the most iconic. It's probably the most It's definitely everybody's main go-to. I feel like the green one is kind of like they attribute it to more Yoda and other stuff like that. It's not really the main combat weapon, right? Because the blue one is more so for combat. It's more for strong warriors, I guess. And the green one is for people who are like, who need a lightsaber, but they're more in touch with the Force. It's kind of stuff like that. Is what I've read and what I've figured out about. But I never liked the idea that the red lightsaber makes you evil, or like only the Sith get red lightsabers. You know what I mean? Like that's why I kind of liked evil villains. Like General Grievous, I liked when he collected multiple, like the green and blue lightsabers, and he used that from Jedi that he killed. Spoilers, if you haven't if you haven't watched Star Wars, spoilers, all right? And I don't think I need to put that out there, but I'm just saying, all of the Star Wars movies, if you haven't watched any of those, but spoiler alert right now, okay? A little late, but you know what I'm saying. Anyways, he would carry those and he would fight with that. And I was always kind of like, yeah, like, why wouldn't you use that? Or why wouldn't any, because like if you're a Sith Lord, if you're like working for, at the time, if you're one of the bad guys, why not just carry around a blue one or a green one to try to fit in? But I don't know. That's just me. And I always felt like, what if a regular good Jedi used a red lightsaber? That would be cool too. I thought that would definitely be a nice fit. But overall, the lightsaber is something that I've always wanted. It's something that's just so cool. Something so. You ever think about like, what would you do in like a dangerous situation? So like I used to think about this in school all the time. When I was growing up, I was like, if somebody comes into the room right now and tries to kill everybody or tries to like attack everybody at the school or whatnot, I'm like, okay, so I'd have to do this and then this. I'd have to like grab the desk and then turn it over, or I'd have to like disarm them and grab them and hit them with the stapler, like stab them with my pen, stuff like that I would think about. And then I was kind of like, if we were living in the Star Wars universe, I would kind of just like, I would pull out my lightsaber and I would just chuck it, and then I would pull it back as soon as I stab him or I cut him apart and stuff like that, and then that would be the end of it. Right? Because I feel like that would be the way that it works. But anyways, back to Star Wars: A New Hope. The situation that's presented to Luke is kind of, it's once in a lifetime. He literally gets a once in a lifetime mission, and he kind of, without Obi-Wan with him, he would have died. He would have been killed right off the bat. But Obi-Wan's a good guy, Obi-Wan, he knows Luke's destiny, and he knows that eventually everything's going to come the way that it's supposed to, and he has to just kind of, he has to not go with it, but like give him a little push, give him the push that Luke needs to become a Jedi, to become something that he needs to be, and something that he is kind of looking for, kind of wants to be. He wants to be a pilot. He wants to be something great. And it's not until the opportunity presents himself that he can actually achieve it and go for it and try it. So this once in a lifetime mission is something, I don't want to say it's something that we all are kind of waiting for. We shouldn't wait for it, right? Like he waits for it, or he dreams about it. And I feel like a lot of us do that. But in reality, it doesn't come to us all so easily. It doesn't come to anybody really all that easily. It takes creating that opportunity for yourself. And I think they got really good at making Luke, they made Luke push, or go after what it is that he wants. So obviously in the beginning of the movie, things happen to him and he has to ride through it, right? And then at the end, when Obi-Wan dies, or is like gives himself over to the Force, he takes it upon himself to be like, no, I want to join the X-Wing fighters or whatever. I want to join that group. I want to take on that role. I want to be a part of it. And he puts himself in that place. He creates that opportunity for himself to fly those ships, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but maybe it is just that easy to on the day of to fly those X-Wing fighter planes, X-Wing fighter ships. Maybe it is that easy. It's really hard to gauge or to tell if it's really that easy, but we'll go with it for the time being. So after that, he just goes for it. He goes after what he wants. He takes life into his own hands. Because after that, he could simply just back away or walk out and do something else. wouldn't that be nuts? Wouldn't that be nuts if Luke was like, yes, we destroyed it and now we're going to walk away, right? Like, it would be so crazy to not continue to take those risks, those opportunities, especially, I guess, because of the friends he made along the way. Han, Leia, Chewbacca, and the whole rebel force kind of supporting him and backing him up. It's kind of hard to be like, no, let me walk away from all of this and just live a normal life like my aunt and uncle. No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to do that. But I'm saying, like, sometimes it can't happen that way, or it works out like that. So he gets this once-in-a-lifetime mission, and they eventually meet Han Solo and Chewbacca. And they're just... The thing about them that I liked was that it wasn't so much that they were bad guys. It was more so like they wouldn't be there if they didn't owe something. So when I first watched it, I was like, Obi-Wan's the cool, the person to keep your eyes on. But then once they come onto the screen, I'm like, okay, these are the guys who are gonna shake things up. They're gonna maybe ruin things a little bit. So not necessarily wild cards, but more so unknown. You don't know what their exact goals are. They're just kind of like, yeah, we want to be free, and then after that, we'll see. Which is why he eventually runs away, but then he kind of comes back. Anyways, I say all that to say, I also really, really like why can't I talk today? The Millennium Falcon. That thing, I mean, when you want to talk about space travel, when you want to talk about, like, what's your kind of ideal ship looking like? Now, there are any number of things that you could actually make it look like. Like, I remember when I watched Lilo and Stitch, I was like, that police cruiser in space kind of thing is kind of, it looks so cool to me. But then after I watched the Star Wars and I saw the Millennium Falcon, I was like, yeah, it's a lot more spread out. There's a more room inside. It feels like it takes a team to really operate in it. To just the way that it was shaped, the kind of disc form of it, and I just found it not better or worse, but I was kind of like, this thing can do anything. And don't you always kind of like have that attachment to something, like a certain car maybe, or a bicycle, and you're like, this thing can handle anything. It can take me through the mountains, it can take me over water, it can take me anywhere, right? And that's kind of how I not necessarily got attached to it, but I was just kind of thinking to myself, like, the Millennium Falcon is the spaceship that I would want over any other ship in the franchise. Like, you have those big ones, you have those little ones, and then you have like the moderate to big ones. You know what I'm saying? So that's the kind of ship I want. Just something fast, something cool, something that can fit a bunch of friends and people in there, and it's able to, it's able to get you to. It's able to help you achieve your goals, is what I'm trying to say. So when I watch them, and I obviously equate Han Solo, Chewbacca to the Millennium Falcon, I just kind of think to myself, how much do those two really... Because they do like a whole... They do a whole prequel of like Han Solo and how he gets the Millennium Falcon and that whole thing. But I'm just kind of like, I like it a little bit better and more mystery. I kind of like, how did they form together and how did they get the ship and how did they, I kind of like it being a little loose, not so like, this is actually how it all unfolded. But I'm like, no, actually, can we just leave that alone? That's why I haven't watched that. That's like the only Star Wars movie I haven't watched or like really taken in. So, long story short, I see the Millennium Falcon. They go on an adventure, and some stuff happens during Star Wars: A New Hope. I'm just talking about like Star Wars in general, but this, when I first watched it, I was kind of like, the Millennium Falcon is cool. I want a ship like that. I want that exact ship or whatever, and I want to travel around the galaxy. That's what was so cool about it, is that they could have that freedom to just go wherever they wanted, sort of, even though they were in debt and they're just like smugglers. It just was so cool. And finally, it is May 4th, so I want to say this. The Force is such a vague understanding of it, but I kind of just think about it like it comes and it goes. It's not like a permanent, oh, well, it is a permanent. I don't know how to exactly describe it. I think when Luke uses the Force from, obviously Obi-Wan tells him, use the Force, Luke. And then he does it, and then he shoots down and destroys the Death Star and whatnot. That's cool, you know, and that's a part of it. But wouldn't it be funny if Luke tried to do it, but he still missed? Like, it just didn't work out that way. And I feel like if he used the Force and then he still fails, like, is the Force always perfect? Or I guess it's more so your connection to it, huh? Because using the Force doesn't necessarily mean you're always at your strongest, maybe. But I guess the more attached you are to it, or the more connection you have to the Force, the more strength and power the more strength and power you'll have to it. But I kind of just thought of it as like them pulling and pushing objects. I didn't really think about the Force as like a actual, I don't want to say organism. It's like a, what am I trying to say here? To me, when I first watched it, I was just like, it's about hypnotizing people, or like getting them to do what you want, or, you know, maybe as like a targeting system of sorts, right? Or maybe belief in yourself. But it's actually a lot more complicated, I guess, or a lot more deep than I gave it credit for. But all I'm trying to say is, the first time I watched it, using the Force was kind of just like, okay, whatever, you know. I didn't really, I think the Force was just kind of a way to be like, you have to get it right this time, or it was kind of a final effort for people to kind of say, it's kind of like a saying that they put in there, and it was a way to be like, not be religious, if that makes sense. You know, some people have like certain different beliefs, and then they just put a different kind of context to it. They're like, may the Force be with you. And you're like, okay, cool, whatever. Overall, I think that Star Wars: A New Hope was a perfect introduction to the Star Wars saga, the Star Wars franchise, as I think most people would agree with me on. Even though when I was like, I wasn't around when that original series came out. I only knew of the prequels, the episode 1, 2, and 3. Those were coming out while I was a kid, and I don't know. I guess I was too young at the time to really even care all that much. But when I eventually did see them, it was kind of cool to look at it like after and then before, you know, kind of see how it all unfolded after we see the conclusion to it all, sort of thing, right? Like that was the first time I had ever seen prequels or kind of understood a whole another story had taken place prior to all of this. And that was very eye opening to me. It was like, oh, you could tell a story. You don't have to tell a story very linearly. Like, you don't have to introduce Anakin first. You can introduce him later on, as a prequel. You start off with his son instead, and then you can get back to how it all started, how it all came to be, essentially. And that's what I liked about the Star Wars franchise. That's kind of what I thought was so different about it. And Star Wars: A New Hope was just, it was a little bit I don't want to say cheesy. It was a little bit, it wasn't of the highest quality, but you have to think about like the time it was made and what it looked like. But for what it was and for what it means to people and how it created this whole franchise, I thought it was so cool. And I definitely liked the lightsabers. I liked Obi-Wan. And then I came to grow to like Luke. And just the whole galaxy is so big. It was just, for me, I was just kind of like, how do they stop telling stories? How can they keep on expanding and finding new ways to tell different Jedi stories and stuff like that? Which is why I was so, it baffles me a bit that they could come up a little bit stale sometimes, or they could only stick to one story or one kind of area. It's like there's a whole galaxy out there, and upon those, there are galaxies of those galaxies and different realities and different universes of those same galaxies, but they're like tweaked a little bit differently. So I kind of just think like, if they're running out of material, it's only because they're limiting themselves. And I feel like Star Wars has so much potential, but they're slowly crumbling and wasting it a bit. But other than that, Star Wars: A New Hope is definitely a great introduction to it if you've never watched Star Wars, and it's a perfect beginning. I think it's one of the best opening films to a franchise that has been made, especially for the time it was made, the story. I think it all just fits perfectly. And yeah, anyways, happy May 4th, guys, and go watch Star Wars if you get a chance. I'll see you guys all next time. Thank you.